Welcome to Front Porch Lawyer, where we address the humanity of lawyering. Many attorneys are winning battles in the courtroom, but losing battles in their lives. From interpersonal relationships to stress management, Front Porch Lawyer explores topics that improve your practice, your lifestyle, and even your love life. Leave feeling a little more inspired with a smile on your face. Here's your host, Francine Tone.
Have you ever negotiated with a bully? Gosh, bullies are just simply not fun to be around, are they? And it's impossible to prepare to deal with a bully. If you're prepared, you get bullied. If you're not prepared, you get bullied. If you're right, you get bullied. If you're wrong, you get bullied. And you can't reciprocate because you're not a bully. Hi, welcome to Front Porch Lawyer, where we explore the humanity of lawyering. I'm Francine Tone, your host. Now, years ago, when I'd been practicing about 5 years or so, I was a trial attorney and I represented an accountancy firm who was named a defendant among many other defendants. Now, my client's involvement in the dispute was a bit tangential, but there was exposure, of course, so we had to defend. The plaintiff was represented by a team of lawyers, the dream team, I suppose, and each person on that team was a well-known bully in our community. But now there was a team of them, and we ended up in mediation. Now, my client was angry because he didn't think that he should have been sued, and he felt that his involvement was so minuscule that he shouldn't have to pay any money. And he came to this mediation with kind of a chip on his shoulder, with the attitude, I'm not giving them a dime. I know that's surprising from a client. But during mediation, each defendant's attorney went into the room individually. And the team of the plaintiff's lawyer sat in the room at this long conference table. And each defendant's attorney went in and they would come out looking like they got beat up. One came out looking paler than he was when he went in. Somebody else came out kind of shaking their head and looking down at the ground. Another one came out visibly shaking. And when it was my turn, the attorney coming out of the room had his head down and he looked up at me very quietly and said, "Good luck." Like, oh no, what have I got myself into? So I entered the room and I had to walk the length of the room from the door to the other end of this long conference table. And at the head of the table sat the mediator, who was a retired justice of the Court of Appeal. So I thought, surely the mediator must have control over these bullies. So I sat down on one side of the table, just feeling okay, and right next to the retired justice. And across the table sat 5 men in dark suits, all looking at me with like skinny little eyes as I sat down. And I opened my file and I looked up and I took note that only one lawyer on the other side of the table even had a file, and it was closed. I'm like, oh boy, I wonder what we're going to talk about now. So the mediator began by just simply identifying who my client was, and then gave the floor to the bullies, who all then started pretty much speaking at the same time, sometimes naming off a bunch of theories and assertions and accusations, most of which had nothing to do with my client. And I kind of sat there in amazement because they weren't talking about the things that my client had done. They were talking about all sorts of things. I didn't even know if half of what stuff they're talking about was even true or even applied to the case. And when they were done, the mediator turned to me and asked me a question, and I answered the question. When I was done, the bully team took over and started jumping on everything I had said as I continued to sit quietly. And that repeated itself a few times. I couldn't compete with the bully team. They were bigger than me. They were louder than me. They spoke faster than me. They had more to say than me. It's like, this is a no contest. There's no way I can compete with them at their level. So I only spoke when the mediator asked me a question. And when I left the room, though, I was not pale, I wasn't shaking my head, I was not visibly shaking. I know this not because I handled the bullies, it's because the other defendants' attorneys came up to me and said, "How come you don't look like you got beat up?" And I realized I hadn't gotten beat up, and it's because I had employed a very simple strategy. And the strategy is do not engage. I know it sounds so simple, and it is. So I didn't have a name for this strategy back then, but over the years, my husband and I have employed this strategy, and we've come to call it simply do not engage. And by the way, this strategy works for spouses, children, all sorts of things. When somebody just kind of goes on and on and on, just do not engage. So I chose not to engage. As the bully team spoke, often on top of each other, I did not try to outspeak them, outdo them, outfence them. Nothing. I simply did not engage. I did nothing. I waited quietly until it was my turn to speak, and I said what I came there to say. I didn't try to make a counterpoint for every point they made, most of which was not relevant to my client anyway. And most of what they were trying to do was just to shake my confidence, which is what they had done to the other attorneys. Silence is not acquiescence. Now, often people, lawyers included, feel as if anytime somebody says something that needs to be corrected, failing to correct constitutes acceptance and acquiescence. It does not. Silence means nothing. If what somebody else is saying has no value, don't give it value by making comment on it. Don't waste your precious energy. That's what happened to the other lawyers. They kept wanting to come back with counterpoints, and they just kept getting beat up, and all their energy was taken away, and they were exhausted. Do not engage is not something that I would employ in trial, because hopefully at trial I've got a judge and a bailiff to take care of bullies. But in a negotiation room, there's just no reason for this. So in the negotiation, this is where I see the bullying happen, and I see the effects of that bullying on other lawyers. If the mediator wants clarification, they'll ask for it. And you can also clarify when it's your turn to speak, if you must clarify. But if you employ do not engage consistently, it will become apparent that you don't respond to nonsense. You don't give it any value. You do this long enough, it'll become clear that you consider almost everything they are saying as nonsense. And while saving your energy, you just sit and listen, and you'll learn so much from what the bullies are saying. And it reminds me of a famous quote by the Dalai Lama. He said, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. And trust me, when you sit and listen to bullies, you'll learn a lot of new stuff. So the do not engage strategy does several things for you. One, you don't get aggravated at what they're saying because you're not going to engage. Two, it helps keep your stress level down. It keeps your stress level under managed. You're just managing it, and it manages your emotions. Three, you don't leave the room looking all beat up so that your client doesn't look at you and go, oh my God, my attorney's been beat up. They don't have that reaction. And your client will actually listen to you even more, especially in a case where everybody else comes out looking beat up and you don't. So my client ended up settling that case for a couple $1,000s, despite the bully teams claiming outrage at the small amount, which is kind of silly because in mediation, there's no point in being outraged when you can't make a deal unless everybody agrees anyway. But there was no shaking hands at the end of that. Like, glad it was done. Thank you for being here. No, the bullies stayed in character. So it was ugly all the way to the very end. But my client was happy because his lawyer did not get beat up. I wasn't stressed out. And I was able to keep my client calmer because I wasn't stressed out. Because my client saw that I wasn't getting beat up like the other defendants' attorneys, my client listened to me because he knew I was coming from a place of strength, not of stress and anxiety like the others. So you've got this extra benefit that it's your client's perception of how you're handling negotiations puts more trust in you. It instills that trust that they need to have to take your guidance in negotiations. So use this simple strategy to avoid getting into a verbal fencing match, which is what the bullies want you. Just do not engage. So hit the button below to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of the future episodes of Front Porch Lawyer. And thank you for joining me on my front porch. This is Front Porch Lawyer and Francine Tone, and I'll see you next time.